Which is the most promiscuous narcissist? You may have heard of it said of somebody that they've had more pricks than a second-hand dartboard, or that he's no stranger to a fish supper. But which narcissist is the most promiscuous? In the video, Is the Narcissist Secretly Gay? And if you haven't listened to that, why not? I explained to you the gender preferences in sexual matters for narcissists. In the video, Any Hole Will Do, I talked about the selectiveness, or lack thereof, of the narcissist when it came to the choice of sexual partner, whether the narcissist is particularly bothered by looks or isn't, when it comes to making the beast with two backs. Next, we address which narcissist is the most promiscuous. Which narcissist has a snatch like a hippo's yawn, has been at more bedsides than Dr. Kildare. What is promiscuous? It's an adjective meaning characterized by many transient sexual relationships. As you know from my work, I categorize narcissists into cadres, somatic, victim, elite, and cerebral, and a range of schools, lesser, mid-range, greater, and ultra, and the first three subdivided further into a variety of subschools. This video looks at the question of ascertaining who has had more knob ends than weekends to determine promiscuity. Which kind of narcissists have had more cock than a farmyard hen, for enabling you to understand, amongst all of the subschools, which of those narcissists which have repeated and multiple sexual relationships, either moving from one to another fairly quickly, or, is often more likely to be the case, when you as the intimate partner primary source are in a position of devaluation, the narcissist that would shag a barber's floor is engaging in sexual congress with other people alongside you, and that this promiscuity occurs, but is also the question of whether it is obvious or not, whether it's a case of that individual having had more hands up her than sooty, and seen more Jap's eye than an oriental optician. As you know, sex is a weapon of mass seduction, and narcissists utilize it in a variety of ways to ensure that we ensnare and keep ensnared individuals and secure the prime aims of control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. Narcissists, of course, are known for having many transient sexual relationships, many different relationships. But is this applicable to all narcissists? And if so, which ones are the most promiscuous? Accordingly, when it comes to determining who has seen more helmets than Hitler, we'll be working out which narcissists are generally more promiscuous to begin with, and then of those which are, which is the one that is most, to enable you to understand who has done more lengths than Michael Phelps and been shot over more times than Baghdad. Let's begin with the cadres. The victim cadre. These individuals are not promiscuous. Although they will use sex for the purposes of manipulation, it is not their major go-to weapon, and their general helplessness, uselessness, self-pitying, downtrodden, incompetent behaviours, some of which manifest in the sexual arena, are used to manipulate, but generally it is not a case of promiscuity being one. What about the cerebrals? Again, sex is utilised, as I have explained elsewhere, but they are not noted for promiscuity. That doesn't mean that they won't cheat, but they are not ranking high compared to the other cadres when it comes to the issue of promiscuity. What then about the elites, which are an amalgam of somatic and cerebral? There is greater potential for there to be promiscuity. Finally, the somatics. Naturally, the individuals which are all about appearance, material things, being seen, and of course, more usually about using sex and engaging in sex for the purposes of achieving the prime aims, it doesn't come as much of a surprise for you to learn that it is the somatic narcissists who are the ones that have handled more balls than Tom Brady and seen more stiffs than Quincy. So those are the cadres. But let's screw this down, so to speak, and look at the subschools. Let's start off with the ultra, and the greater narcissists. These narcissists find it extremely easy to obtain sexual partners. The reason being they're invariably good-looking, in good shape, have access to wealth, status, power, connections, are in prominent positions, and therefore it is very easy for the ultra and greater narcissists to obtain sexual partners. But does that translate into promiscuity? Well, when it comes to the upper greater narcissist and the ultra, they well could be described as behaving in a promiscuous way. However, they are choosy with regard to the question of who they be doing the fandango with. And therefore, that is something which tends to militate against them being highly promiscuous. Furthermore, ultras and upper greater narcissists tend to operate behind the scenes. And therefore, if there is promiscuity, it isn't obvious. And they're certainly not the most promiscuous when it comes to the narcissists. What about the middle greater narcissist? Is this a case of the individual behaving like a dog with 6 dicks? Certainly. Of the greater narcissists, the middle greater is the most promiscuous. This is because many middle graders operate in prominent positions of fame and renown, often the entertainment industry, pop music, rock music, film, stage, possibly politics, sport, various forms of entertainment, stand-up comedians and so forth. And invariably, many of the middle graders are outgoing individuals, extroverts, very charismatic. And indeed, although they will operate a facade, it's almost expected as part of their fame and the arenas within which they operate for them to be promiscuous. Think about particular rap stars, for instance, or the screen siren who is dated by multiple suitors. And therefore, promiscuity is high when it comes to middle greater narcissists. But whether they are actually the most promiscuous remains to be seen. With lower greater, promiscuity does occur, but they are not the most obvious. What about the Midranges? Upper Midranges would certainly be regarded as behaving in a promiscuous manner, haughty, arrogant, quite polished, charming as well, not to the level of a greater, but they've certainly got plenty of it, and this is the subschool which is often mistaken for the greater category. So there will be instances where there may well be an individual who's been cocked more times than John Wayne's pistol. However, their facade of superiority means they're quite choosy, and also because they're not graders, they don't always get what they'd prefer, and therefore promiscuity does occur, but it is not rampant. What about mid-range type A? Do we see here somebody who has a face like a painter's radio? Promiscuity is far less likely with the middle range type A. This is because of the operations of facade of being a good person. That doesn't mean that a middle ranger type A won't cheat, far from it, but they are going to be far less likely to have a steady roll call of sexual partners because of the facade that is operated and their general belief that they are a good person. They will cheat, of course, on the basis that the other person made them do it, but habitual promiscuity is not going to be seen with this particular sub-school. What about the middle range type B? Again, similar to the other mid-ranger, the middle range type A, this is not an individual who could be said to have seen more ceilings than Michelangelo. This is because, again, they operate a facade of believing that they are a good person, and also they tend to be crybabies, whiners, and serial complainants. And if anything is going to pour cold water over the libido, it's somebody who's whining about their circumstances. It doesn't really get the engine going, does it? And therefore, those two factors mean that whilst again a middle ranger type B will invariably cheat, after all they are a narcissist, and especially so if they are somatic, they are not going to be heavily promiscuous. What then about the lower mid-range narcissist? Is it the case that one could say that with a female lower mid-ranger that she's been laid on more kitchen floors than linoleum? Well, in such circumstances, the lower mid-ranger can be fairly obvious about their promiscuity because they only operate an intermittent facade, and it would be fair to say that they will operate, especially where they are a somatic, with a high level of promiscuity. They, of course, will be less choosy as well. And, as explained in Any Hole Will Do, a combination of being less choosy with regard to the choice of partner and the type of narcissist they are, linking with the cadre of somatic, means that lower mid-rangers are often highly promiscuous. Not always, but it's often the case. But is it the case that they are the most highly promiscuous of all of the subschools? We need to see what happens with regard to the lessers. First of all, let's have a look at the out-and-out loser that's the lower lesser. Is it the case that he's done more screwing than Black and Decker? Or is she responsible for more merry men than Robin Hood? Well, the problem that lower lesser has is they'd very much like, especially where they're somatic, to nail anything that moves. Unfortunately for them, they often can't because of their lack of attractive qualities. Invariably bereft of financial firepower, often not good looking, but that's not always the case. And the fact that they are in and out of employment, if at all, and their fearsome and nasty tempers means that attracting people to even do the nasty with proves particularly problematic for the lower lesser. And where they are entirely willing and will be obvious about it, promiscuity doesn't rank highly with these individuals, at least compared to the other subschools. What about the middle lesser? Is this an individual who's been under more sheets than a worker in a Chinese laundry? Well, similar to the lower lesser, the middle lesser would very much like to be banging everything that moves, but is also hindered by the low threshold on ignited fury, meaning that during seduction, if they're rebuffed, they can erupt, derailing it, and the capacity for being considerable sulkers as well, the mid-range element in them, means that that's not particularly attractive. And add in factors such as their inability to hold down a decent job, have a lot of money, particularly look after themselves, be particularly well-dressed or hygienic, means that the middle lesser, whilst entirely willing to be promiscuous, is going to struggle in that regard. This leaves us with our two final subschools. Does this contain the most promiscuous? What about the upper lesser type B? This is the bullying, brash, boasting type of narcissist, and indeed they are promiscuous. But they're not the most. The reason being is that their out-and-out aggression invariably causes problems, that they manhandle a very touchy-feely, so that they would actually drive people away from them, such as their entire lack of boundary recognition and rampant sense of entitlement. So it's not the case that with a female upper lesser type B, it could necessarily be said that her knickers are up and down more than a fiddler's elbow. This leaves us, then, with upper lesser type A. When it comes to the upper lesser type A, it can be safely said that he gets more action than a McDonald's 24-hour drive-through, that she's seen more shaft than an elevator, and has taken more loads than a washing machine. The upper lesser type A is the most promiscuous of all the subschools. This is because they have high energy levels, hence their upper status within the lesser category. They're completely shallow and superficial individuals, which generally means as well that when it comes to Any Hole Will Do, they're less choosy. They are a whirlwind and are often quite hedonistic individuals, which also means that they have a greater opportunity to be in particular hunting grounds, such as bars, nightclubs, parties, swingers meetings, etc., to cater for their need to control through sex, and therefore are promiscuous. We might refer to other subschools as the dog with 6 dicks. The upper lesser type A goes large and is the dog with a dozen dicks. Nailing anything that moves, chasing skirt, sniffing down, anything that has a pulse, you will find the upper lesser types A, both male and female, of course, with extremely high levels of promiscuity. Superficial, uncaring, like all narcissists, having no emotional empathy, operating with a rampant sense of entitlement. Anybody is fair game, and, because there is no facade, they're very obvious about it. These are the type of individuals that you could go on a night out and lose them within half an hour because he or she is immediately chasing after somebody to bed for the night, or at least the first of possibly many. They are the individuals that we found in the middle of a heap of individuals, causing the sprawling mass of limbs and gyrating hips. The upper lesser type A is the most promiscuous narcissist. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.